Hi everyone, my name is Phil and welcome to Phil Does 3D. I'm a multimedia and 3D artist and I stream on Twitch weekdays from 5 PM Pacific time in the US, 11 AM in Australia and 12 AM in the UK. This is just a reminder guys about the change in times. Now it's 12 AM in the UK for this week, but you guys go into daylight savings next week, so that will push it back to 1 AM UK time for you guys. It'll always be 5 PM Pacific time in the United States. That will never change, regardless of daylight save. I work on American daylight saving time. And it'll still be 11 AM in Australia until we finish daylight savings here. So just a reminder, next week for you guys that are in the UK, it will be 1 AM start time. You guys in the US though, 5 PM Pacific time is not changing and never will. So, we're working on a Art Deco building interior and exterior in Unreal Engine 4.15. Now I made this building back in 2011 in UDK and I'm redoing it now for Unreal Engine 4. Last week we were working on, this is the Art Deco building actually, pardon me, in Max that we're going to be taking into Unreal Engine 4.15. I've just laid out all the assets that are going to go into the building. Again, I've worked in games development. I currently work in architectural visualization. This is the way that most designers that work in games development will lay out their assets. This way you won't forget anything. If you lay them all out, you'll be sure to remember to have everything ready for when you want to start building your building in Unreal. Last week we were working on this ironwork that goes inside of the building. Now, if anyone watching last week will remember, when I was doing a render to texture on this asset here, we were having a problem with the render to texture. Now that problem, it turns out, was the alpha map. If I just open up my material editor and go to where that texture map is in my stack here, it's down here. The outer frame, left frame was the one we were using, but outer frame is the same. It was set to an image alpha, and that's the reason when we were doing a render to texture, we were getting those strange white lines happening across the render to texture. So that was the problem. I just switched it to none, and that fixed that problem. Now, originally last week I was thinking, I was doing painting the texture up in Substance Painter for these. And then I thought, well, I actually prefer the original texture, but I've since changed my mind again. And I brought that into Substance Painter and I've just added, as you can see here, about 4 or 5 different substances to the gate. And that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of that ironwork section. So I'm just making sections of it a gold paint, parts of it more of a rusty iron, and then the separate base here, the square base, is a separate material as well. Now I was finding with Substance Painter, working with multi-materials was proving problematic. Now this could just be unique to 3D Studio Max, so if you're not using Max you may not have a problem, or it could be a problem that's actually in the new version of Substance Painter. I'm using 2.5.3. My problem was I couldn't get a material ID to render out. Normally what you do is, if I jump back into Max, you would set up your object like I have here with multi-materials. And as you can see, I'm using 4 different multi-materials here. So you'd go into your material editor, you would create 4 different materials that you would assign to your model. Then you would export that model as an FBX. Then what you're supposed to be able to do is open Substance Painter, go into your baked textures, turn on your ID map here, and load in that ID version, that multi-material version you exported as an FBX here, after loading in your standard model, which is just using a single texture. And Substance Painter is supposed to be able to, if you change the material color, to render out an ID map. Now that is not working for me. Every time I do a render out, it comes out black. There is a way to work around that, which is what I'm going to be showing you now in Max. So I'm not going to use Substance to do my ID mapping. I'm going to use 3D Studio Max. Now again, we'll just look at that asset that we were looking at in Substance Painter here. I've brought that into the Unreal Engine. It's this one here. And this is what we're going to be doing for the other parts of the iron gate as well, the ironwork. This is the gate section here actually. So I just brought this in to make sure I was happy with the textures that I'd used, and they're okay. So we're going to be using the same textures to paint up the rest of that ironwork for that section of the model. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you that in Unreal Engine 4.15. As you can see, we've already brought a few models in, and what we're doing is, as we work on the model in 3D Studio Max, we're exporting it and bringing it into the Unreal Engine. So by the time we've finished working on all of our pieces of geometry here and exporting our main building, we should be ready to go to rebuild this in Unreal Engine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work on this, the rest of this ironwork here. I'm just going to isolate this section. I'm going to make sure that I'm not grouped, and I'm not, which is good, but that does mean I'm going to have to break up my model. You don't want to take a model like this with this many polygons directly into Unreal Engine. You want to break it up so that you can instance parts of it to reuse it. And that'll just save on memory in the game engine, as well as texture size and all that type of thing, polygon count. So we've already got one of these sections done, which is the gate section that sits in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to these swirled sections here. So let's select our object and go into sub-object mode. Okay, I thought this might be a problem. Now again, anyone watching me from last week will have known that some of these assets for some reason have come in with split verts. So what I have to do is go in and weld the vertices together. Now that's not a big deal really. Some of them look like they're okay, but others I think need to be welded. So let's start by welding our vertices to make sure that everything is good to go there. I'm just going to go into vertex mode. Select all my verts. Make sure I have ignore backfacing switched to all. Otherwise I won't be selecting any vertices on the back. And again, I've made sure I'm selecting everything. That looks good. Just going to pull in a bit here. Now we're in edit mesh mode. I'm just going to turn that off for a minute. Always work in edit poly mode, because edit poly will give you a lot more options to work on the mesh than edit mesh mode. And in Max you just right click and say convert to edit poly. So no matter what 3D software you're using, make sure you work in edit poly mode. Now we'll go back into vertex mode. They're all still selected from our last time we selected them. I'm going to open up the weld dialog. I'm just going to move it up so that we can see it here. Now I'm just going to pull this up until it gets to around about 0.5. I'm actually going to dial that in, I think. So 0.50, might pull it down by 1. Oh, it's gone way too high, hang on. It's because my decimal point is missing, that's not good. 0.5 is 0.0. Now I'll pull it down. .49. Now I'm just going to check my mesh here before I commit to that. It's all fine. Now I'm just making sure I haven't gone too far on the weld and created any weird spots anywhere. This, you know, if you wanted to go into it and select each pair of vertices to weld them together, it would be a major pain in the ass. So doing it this way, where you just select everything and you make sure you don't go too high on your weld, you can fix those split verts without causing too much pain and work. Everything there looks okay, so I'm going to commit to that now. I'm going to turn off my vertices, go back into my sub-object mode, and now when I select these pieces, they should all be welded together. And that looks good. That looks good. And I think we're good to go now. So everything is welded correctly. We haven't messed up any of our verts. But now my problem is this is one piece of geometry, and like I said, you don't want to take something like this into Unreal because there are parts of it you can reuse. Again, this side section is exactly the same as the gate that we textured up already in Substance Painter. So we have our gate, and again our gate sits, there are two of them, one on either side here in the middle. But because it's exactly the same as that piece of geometry, I'm not going to redo that. I'm just going to use the gate for these side pieces. And we can see here that these swirled sections are repeated 4 times. So we really only have to worry about one section of that. So I'm going in sub-object mode, I'm going to select just one of those swirled sections. Now again, I could go into my front viewport and do it a multi-selection there, but me doing it this way gradually, it's for me to make sure that I have everything welded together correctly. Takes a minute longer, but it just for peace of mind to make sure that everything is welded up properly. Okay, that one, that one, that one. I'm also just going to jump around to the back to make sure that everything is selected. That's okay. And select this one up the top. Okay, now I'm going to detach that piece of geometry. We'll turn off our sub-object and select that new piece there. I'm also going to go into my hierarchy tab and affect the pivot, and I'm just going to center it to the object. That'll just make moving it around when we take it into Unreal easier. Now again, I'm not working at 0, 0, 0 world space here. You used to have to work at 0, 0 before you did an export to bring it into Unreal, but there's an option now in Unreal that changes that so you don't have to worry about moving your objects to the 0, 0, 0 world space position before you export. But what we're going to do is we're going to copy that, so I'm just going to jump into my top viewport here. Hold down my shift key and drag out a copy. And I'll rename this original piece. I'll call it Iron Swirls. And I'm going to call the copy that we just made Iron Swirls and _ID. Now we want to assign material IDs to this second piece that we just copied. So let's open up our material editor and decide what we want to be what. Now I know because I made these gold, I want this piece in here to be gold as well. So I'm just going to go again into sub-object mode, select that central piece, and assign this gold material. And all the gold material is just a standard coloured material. It has no bitmap assigned to it. All I've done is assign an ambient colour. And it doesn't matter what that colour is really. Just make sure that all your multi-materials are a different colour so that you can distinguish them in your ID map. So that bit's going to be gold. I want this bottom piece to be a different colour as well. I want that as a separate object, a separate material. And square base is the one I'm using for that, so I'm going to assign that colour there. Now the frame is another separate object, so again still in sub-object mode. I'm going to select all my frame pieces here. And probably that one down the middle as well. And I think the frame is this greeny coloured one. So again, I'm going to assign the material. And now we'll select our swirls. Remember guys, if you have any questions or anything you're not sure about, please feel free to pop into chat. Like I said, I currently work in architectural visualization. I've been working in 3D for more than 10 years. I've worked for a couple of different game studios in the past. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop into chat and ask me. It doesn't have to be about Max, it can be about anything regarding 3D. I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer to everything, but if I can help, I'm more than happy to try. If you just want to pop in and say hello, that's cool. If you just want to watch, that's completely fine. So we've selected our swirls. Let's, well, scrolls, we're calling them here. Let's assign our color to that as well. Now we can go out of sub-object mode and look at what we've done, just to recap again. We made a copy of our original mesh here, which uses one material. And on that copy, we've gone into sub-object mode and assigned different colors to the different parts of the model that we want to use different textures on. So we're going to be using 1, 2, 3, 4 different textures on that piece of geometry. I'm just going to copy the name up here, which is iron_swirls_ID. We're going to export this model. Let's jump into our exports folder. Let's create a new folder. And we're just going to call it Iron Swirls. Again, just good housekeeping to keep everything organized. I always like to put things in their individual folder. We're exporting it as Iron Swirls. Actually, before we do that, we actually don't need to export this version, because we're going to, if you were trying to do your ID mapping in Substance Painter through their baked textures, if you can get it to work, like I said, I can't get it to work for Max when I export from Max. We're going to do our ID models, ID material in Max. So let's export our original one textured version here, and that's just called Iron Swirl. So export selected, because I don't want to select I don't want to export everything, just those swirls. Here. And again, I'm just saving it as an FBX file. And the only options I have selected are smoothing groups, triangulate, and preserve edge orientation. And I just created a setting called Painter to UE4. That's just for me, so I can easily change between different settings if I wanted to in Max here. Alright, we've exported that. Let's select our original ID copy here and let's isolate it again. It just makes life a bit easier. Alright, now we're going to have to UV map this, and you can't have overlapping UVs if you're using multi-materials. So if you're going to be multi-material, using a multi-material in Substance Painter, hey, how's things? Haven't seen you in a while. Yes. Good to see you in chat. I can't pronounce your username, dude. Euro. I'll call you Euro. Sorry, but good to see you. Just for your benefit or anyone new that may have just popped into the channel, what we're doing is we're going to be taking this Art Deco building that I made in... You're good? You're modelling away? Cool. I made this Art Deco building in UDK back in 2011, so 6 years ago. I'm going to fast forward past some of the concept art in the beginning. We're going to be recreating this building in Unreal Engine 4.15, the new version of Unreal, because I want to see what the lighting changes and things are like. So we're updating the assets for this building, because this was created 6 years ago. We're going to be updating the assets for it, retexturing some of them, making a couple of them a little bit more higher poly, because 6 years on we can afford to go higher poly on our model. And then we're going to be remaking this in the new version of Unreal, because I want to compare the old version lighting to the new version's lighting. I know that Epic have made a lot of changes to the Unreal lighting engine. I'll just let this play through a little bit more. So that's what we're doing here for this project now that we're working on. We're finished with the garden terrace. We are working on this Unreal Engine Art Deco building. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to remake this building in Unreal Engine 4 and create a new cinematic like this for a fly-through. And again, this was done 6 years ago, so we're going to be updating some of the assets as well. And again, this is for the benefit of anyone new that may be watching and doesn't know what I'm working on or wants to know what I'm working on and what I'm doing. And like I said, guys, please feel free to pop into chat if you've got any questions or anything you're not sure about. Or if you just want to say hi, like you're right there. So that's what we're doing. What we're doing now is we're going to be taking our asset that we just made a multi-material for in Max into Substance Painter and painting it up to look like this gate that we've already done that we did in Substance Painter last week. You'll notice I'll use Substance Painter for some of the assets here. I'll use Mari, which is what we used for the light sconce here as well, which is our 3D painting program. So I'll either use Mari or Substance Painter, just depending on what the asset is and what work needs to be done on it. Substance Painter is good for... so I may have a problem with my material there. Oh, there we go. Just took a little while for it to load in. Substance Painter is good for things like this arched wooden section. This wasn't done in Painter. This was done in Photoshop. I created this texture in Photoshop for this wall panel. But this wooden arch was done in Substance Painter. And Substance Painter is good for things like this, where you're using physically based materials, working on an object that's mainly wood like this, or metal. And I did do some custom painting on this, just with things like the wearing along the edges here of parts of the wood. So I'll either use Substance Painter or I'll be using Mari. I like Mari because I can hand paint more than I can in Painter. The things with Substance Painter is a great program, but everything you make in it tends to look the same. Thank you for the host too, Euro. I appreciate that. Thank you guys. When you host my channel, it's much appreciated. The problem with Substance Painter, it's a great program. I'm not dissing it at all. But everything that comes out of it tends to look a bit the same because they all use the same physically based materials. These materials here. And most artists will use these materials that are provided by Substance, which is what they're for. What you find is everything you create and it starts to look a bit the same. Oh, and thank you for the follow as well, Euro. I appreciate that. Thank you. And do you stream on Twitch at all? If you do, I'll follow your channel as well. I'm happy to, like I said, I follow I watch other guys modeling too on Twitch. One of the reasons I'm on Twitch is to encourage you guys to do 3D modeling. I'm not here just to work on my own work. I'm on Twitch to encourage people to try to do 3D on their own and to do it themselves because it's fun. No, that's cool. You're following now, that's fine. But do let me know if you're a streamer as well and I'll follow your channel. I don't like to follow guys on Twitch unless they stream too, because I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. You do? Mostly game, hard surface stuff? Okay, cool. After the stream I will follow you as well. I don't have my channel open while I'm streaming just because I don't want to... the internet in this country is not great, so it interferes with my streaming if I have my channel open at the same time. So once the stream is finished, I'll follow you as well. So thank you for the host and thank you for the follow. I do appreciate it when you guys follow me on Twitch. Getting back to what I was saying though, a lot of these surfaces tend to, because every artist will use these substances, the models can tend pardon me, can tend to start looking a bit samey. Now that's no fault of the artist, and that's no fault of the program. That's just that's just because you're using physically based materials. You know, car paint is car paint. No getting around that. But it's still very good for certain models, and I do use it. But I prefer to use Mari because I can hand paint my textures a lot more with bitmaps and that type of thing. And Mari is getting into physically based rendering now as well, physically based materials, so it's not as good as Substance Painter for that though, so not yet anyway. But that and the fact too that Mari I can use texture sizes that are huge, like 64K as opposed to 8K, which is what the limit is in Substance Painter. But then again, Substance Painter is really meant more for games work, and Mari was created for cinematic film work, so you can use it for games too, but that's the reason the texture sizes in Mari can go so large. So we have our IDs set here on this piece of geometry. What we have to do now though is we have to unwrap the model and make sure that none of the UVs are overlapping. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to detach these bits of the geometry, because we're not going to be exporting this version of the model at all. We're only using this to render out an ID map, material ID map in Make. So I'm going to detach those swirls. I'm going to detach the frame. I just find that by detaching it, it makes it easier for me to unwrap. You don't need to detach though. You can unwrap on sub-object mode as well. But I like to detach just to keep my work easier to select. We'll make sure we select this one and then detach it as well. And then the bottom piece there. Okay. Let's start with that bottom piece because that's going to be quite easy to unwrap. So I'm going to throw down an unwrap UVW. Open my UVW editor. You can see this already has some UVs assigned to it. That's fine. Like I said, we're not reassigning the UVs on the model we're going to be bringing into, or are we? Actually, we are. We're just, even though it is already unwrapped, the original model was already unwrapped. I want to do a new unwrap on it because it's, I don't like the original unwrapping. So again, remember this was created by me 6 years ago. I want to improve it as much as I can. So I'm going to do a flatten mapping here, just on that piece of geometry. I'm going to uniformly scale it down. And I'm just going to move it off to the side here. I want to make sure that nothing is in my 0 to 1 UV space at this stage. So I've just got it moved it off to the lower corner there. Just pull that in a bit. Get everything organised so you guys can see it a little better. Okay, let's select the next one up. This square here. Now, I'm just wondering whether I should make that gold as well. I think that might look more interesting. Instead of it being the same color as these swirls, I think I'll make that a gold color like that inset section there. So again, that's easy enough. I'm just going to go into sub-object mode here and deselect by holding the Alt key all those ones at the top and detach that piece of geometry. Select it, make sure I assign the right color to it because I want it to be that gold color, which is this one here. Alright, now we can attach that to this gold box, inset section there. So that's just one object. Throw down another unwrap UVW. Again, I'm just going to pull this in a bit so we can see things a bit better. I'll select, they're already all selected, we'll just make sure. We will try a flatten mapping, but we'll see what that gives us. Let's try Let's try box mapping. I'm just trying to see which one will give us the best UVs without me having to go in and physically do it by hand. Because like you guys know, if I can get away with doing UV mapping by hand, I will. One of the least things I like about 3D modelling. It's necessary, but yeah, it's fiddly. I think this will work okay for us in a box map for what we need, because we're using physically based materials anyway. We're not hand painting it. If we were hand painting it in Mari, we may have to be a bit more careful, but we should be good with our box mapping here. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to scale it down a little. I'm just going to move it down to the bottom here. Remember, I have one over here. My first UVs are over in this corner. I've moved these ones to around about the middle. Let's keep going. Let's select a frame now. And unwrap UVW again. Alright, let's still make sure all of our UVs are selected. And for this one, we should be able to do a flatten mapping. Yeah, flatten mapping will work for us there. Again, I'm going to scale it down. Not quite as much as the other two though, because it's a large part of the object. And I'm just going to move it off to the side here. So the last thing we have to unwrap now are these swirls. So we're going to go unwrap UVW again, open up our UVW editor. Now for this one, I think maybe a box mapping will be good for this as well. Let's try that first. Now you've got all these options back to front, back, front, top, bottom. A box map with no top, but I do want a top, so I'm just going to do a normal box mapping. That should work for us. Again, I'm going to scale it down. I hit the wrong one there. Again, not too small though, because it's a large part of the geometry. And I'm going to move that one off to the top here. Alright. Now we have everything uniquely UV mapped, but it's not in the 0 to 1 UV space. And it should be, and it has to be. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to select everything. Now I could either select things and attach them. Let's do it that way. I don't want to confuse you guys. You can select everything and you can group it and do it that way. But if you're using software that maybe doesn't have that that option, let's reattach it again. And again, remember, you don't necessarily have to detach these things to unwrap them. You could do them in sub-object mode. But reattaching them is not a big deal. We're just going to reattach those pieces together again. Didn't like that. We'll start with that piece, I think. You see last time when I was doing the attach, if I started with my larger part and selected that, what it did was it inverted, it flipped the UV, flipped the poly. But if you start with that object and attach the larger one, it'll fix that up. Just if you ever run into that problem. Now we have everything reattached again. Let's collapse our stack actually. Throw down another unwrap UVW. Open our editor. Now you see it's remembered our UVs from when we did it the first time there, and they're all in the outside. But remember, with UVs, it has to be within the 0 to 1 space here. So what we have to do now is move them back in and arrange them correctly. So we'll start with that box down there in the corner. We'll just move that down here. We'll go with the scrolls above it. Now they could probably be scaled back just a little bit more. I'm doing this in relation to the geometry. So that box is bigger than the scroll and that box, so the UVs can be scaled down a little bit. And this is just to keep everything consistent on your texture map. So now we're left with the two larger parts of the geometry here, the frame. Let's move that over. Let's scale this up to take up most of our UV space here. Alright. Now I'm just going to have to start rearranging my UVs so I can fit that last part, which are the scrolls, into our 0 to 1 space. So let's select this part of the object here. Let's move it down. Let's select a couple of these side pieces. Maybe not that many, let's try 3 to begin with. We'll move them down there. We'll move these 3 down here. Now again, remember, you don't want to be overlapping any of these UVs. Select these ones up here. And that one go in there. Alright, now. Let's see if we can get these to fit in here for us. I think we can squash these down a little bit more. They can be quite close to each other, just so long as they don't overlap like that. Okay. Move these ones down here. They're okay. They're not overlapping. They're close, but they don't overlap. That's what's important. Alright, let's have a look at some of these now. This one. Okay. So now we have everything within the 0 to 1 UV space. So our UVs are good to go. I'm going to copy that unwrap UVW. Exit isolation mode. And just to make our life easier, I'm just going to go back. I'm going to select the one in the background there and go back into isolation mode. So we have our original object here that's material ID mapped, just with different plain colored materials that we're going to render out a material ID map for. And we have our original mesh here in the background with our old texture map on it. I'm going to select that and paste that unwrap UVW, which is going to mess up our UVs, but a texture map, but that's fine because we're going to be repainting it in Substance Painter anyway. I'm just going to open up my UV editor to make sure that that is looking right. And that's fine, okay, and it should be because it's just a direct copy we made. So let's export that again now that we have our unwrapped UVWs on it. And iron swirls is good. Now I'm resaving it again because it had our old UVs and we've just remapped the UVs, so we want to make sure we work with the updated UV model. Okay, so that's our original exported and good to go, so that we can start painting that up in Substance Painter. But we want to use the material IDs from this one. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go customize, render and render to texture. Remember, it's just assigned with plain colors for our materials. You've seen me do this before when we were doing baking of textures. We're going to do a similar thing here, but we're going to be rendering out a material ID map. So we're going to use the existing channel 1. We're just going to add a diffuse map. I'm going to make it 2K. We can, remember, go bigger and reduce it down later on, as opposed to being too small and trying to stretch it to make it bigger. We'll save that into our folder. Export.